My name is Kirsten Miller. I'm a communications manager at REL Pacific. And I just want to run through a few housekeeping issues before I pass the baton to our presenters and panelists. So first of all, I don't think I need to explain too much about Zoom to anybody at this point. After the past 7 months, we're all very familiar with this platform. But we would like to ask each of you to mute yourselves during the body of the presentation and to ask questions in the chat box as they come up. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll have some time for a question and answer session toward the end. We are providing live closed captioning for today's webinar and an American Sign Language interpreter as well. So if you have any questions about how to access those functions, please also put a note in the chat box, and my colleague Arisa will do her best to help you with that. So our next slide shows an overview of all 10 regional educational laboratories. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the REL program. So we're one of 10 regional educational laboratories funded by the Institute of Education Sciences, IES, as many of us know them. The RELs are really charged with providing technical support, conducting research, and offering learning opportunities in the service of improved student and system impacts. So the next slide actually is going to show you in more detail the REL Pacific region. We serve educators in the state of Hawaii, 3 U.S. territories, which are American Samoa, Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and then 3 independent nations in free association with the U.S., and that's the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, which includes the states of Koshrai, Pohnpei, Chuuk, and Yap, and then the Republic of Palau. So as you can see from this map, the REL Pacific region is really quite geographically vast. It spans an area that's greater than the entirety of the continental United States. And within these jurisdictions, we collaborate with stakeholders to focus on several distinct priority areas. And those are college and career readiness and success, which is really about aligning system outcomes so that students who graduate from the K-12 system are prepared for entry into college or into the workforce. And then professional learning. For professional learning, we collaborate with teachers and system leaders to create a professional learning environment. Again, a very collaborative environment in which professional learning is welcomed and where there's ownership rather than simply buy-in, and where it works. Language and literacy is our next priority area, and that's about developing language skills and literacy goals in multilingual contexts, and particularly in the lower grades. Our final priority area is data use and readiness, which is today's focus, and that's really about increasing institutional data use to improve, again, system and student outcomes. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to REL Pacific Director, Christina Tiedemann, who's going to tell you a little bit about today's agenda and objectives.
Thank you, Kirsten. So REL Pacific is pleased to support this opportunity to integrate a national forum on education statistics resource with experiences and perspectives through the Pacific region lens. The Pacific perspective in the webinar title reflects a cross-sector P20 approach that represents the quality of education in island settings with close-knit communities, rather than having firm boundaries between the sectors of education. The next slide lists the webinar's objectives. In this webinar, participants will be introduced to the work of the National Forum on Education Statistics through their forum guide to elementary, secondary, virtual education data. The discussion by the 3 presenters will touch on the system and policy implications associated with collecting virtual education data and the challenges and opportunities they have experienced in the implementation process. With this cross-sector education context, the format of the webinar is intended to acknowledge that educators from a single jurisdiction will have to handle the challenges and opportunities in different ways due to the differences in their infrastructures and context. As REL Pacific, we hope to continue to highlight existing resources that are available as schools and systems continue this shift to distance virtual education. Next, I'd like to introduce the agenda and speakers. The webinar will start with an introduction to the Forum Guide by Forum Guide panelist Jay Pennington. He is the Bureau Chief of Iowa's Department of Education's Bureau of Information and Analysis Services. In this role, he leads the Bureau's core function to provide reports to the legislature about the latest education trends and completing fiscal estimates for the cost of implementing new programs. He is also the Iowa State Education SEA representative to the National Forum on Education Statistics, also known as the Forum. Perspectives from the Pacific will be provided by two regional practitioners. The first is Pressler Martin. He serves as the Chief of Curriculum and Instruction for the Pohnpei State FSM Department of Education. In this capacity, he works with administrators to ensure that accurate and actionable elementary and secondary data are collected and analyzed to guide curriculum reform. Among his other duties, he coordinates and carries out teacher trainings and workshops and visits schools and works with teachers to ensure that all students receive quality instructional services. The second is Shaun Suliol. He is the director of the College of Micronesia-FSM's Information Technology Office. He is part of the team that oversees all technology at the college's 6 campuses spread over 4 islands in the Federated States of Micronesia. In the past 6 months, he has guided an overhaul of the college's data systems to collect more accurate student data, reflecting the shifts in teaching and learning. After the discussion, there will be an opportunity for questions and comments from participants before our concluding remarks. Now I will hand the presentation to Jay for the introduction to the forum and the forum guide.
Thanks, Christina. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about the forum and this great resource that we put together. So I'm Jay Pennington, Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Information and Analysis Services at the Iowa Department of Ed. I'm Iowa's state forum representative. And to assist states and districts during this challenging time, I'm going to provide a quick overview of the forum guide to elementary and secondary virtual education. This guide was published in 2016. I'm also going to talk a little bit about our own experiences in Iowa supporting continued learning during this extended school closure. So first I want to talk a little bit, if we could go to the next slide, please, about the forum itself. The National Forum for Education Statistics, commonly called the Forum. The Forum provides an arena for local, state, and national leaders within the education community to discuss issues, address problems, develop resources, and consider new approaches for how we improve data collection as a whole. It's a voluntary, democratic, participative group that's committed to improving the quality, comparability, and utility of elementary and secondary education data. At the same time, we want to be sensitive to the data burden that data collection can create for local school districts. There are, the following territories are associate members of the forum. So we've got the American Samoa Department of Education, the Virgin Islands Department of Ed, Guam Department of Ed, and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands Public School System. So first I'm going to jump into a little bit about Iowa, a little bit about our students, our schools, and our workforce. So within Iowa, we have about 480,000 public school students, 36,000 private school students, largely 75% white, but a growing minority student population. And just in this last year, we now have 1 in 4 students is a student of color in an Iowa public school. 43% of those students are eligible for free or reduced price lunch, and then 13% of students are students with disabilities. In terms of our schools, we have 327 public school districts, 1,300 public schools within those 327 districts, which has a workforce of about 36,000 full-time public school teachers. One other stat that I really like, which I think paints a good picture of the challenges within Iowa, is that we have 10% of districts educating about 52% of the student body. And then the other 48% educates the other 90% of students. So a wide variety of district needs in terms of support that the Department of Ed tries to work with. You can go to the next slide. So a little bit about what happened with COVID. March 16th, all schools closed in Iowa, and educators went home by and large. Students started working from, going home. Some participated in voluntary educational activities. Others participated in required educational activities. But a wide variety depending on the need that the district had and their ability to sort of switch on a dime from, a brick and mortar in-person learning model to largely virtual and remote. We put together a number of resources. So we call it our Iowa Return to Learn plan that every district had to put together as they started thinking about coming back to school this fall. So there's a number of resources that cover things like tracking student engagement, to thinking about social emotional issues related to kids and families, all the way to academic resources that are available. Another piece that I think I'll just mention that was really exciting is we the Iowa Department of Ed, applied for a competitive grant that was awarded by the U.S. Department of Ed. So we received $17.1 million over the next 4 years to develop what we're calling the Iowa e-Learning Central Platform. And for us, this really sort of levels the playing field from the large districts that might have more resources to a smaller district that has never had an online platform. So it provides that equity between districts to provide that kind of platform to everyone. And in addition, it's not just the platform, but we're also building a set of common courses that districts can also take advantage of within that learning platform. So a little bit about Iowa and our experiences related to COVID. I'm going to jump back and talk about the forum itself and some of the resources available. You can see here a great graphic of all the different products that the forum puts together. The forum's been around since 1990 for 30 years and has published a tremendous number of high quality resources, which include best practices on topics of interest to the education community. Again, these are created by folks like myself, which come from a state agency to a local school district. Each each state has both an SEA and an LEA rep, and we work collaboratively on these resources. The forum's produced online courses, videos, newsletters, and other resources. These are all available for free just by clicking that forum link. So more specifically, the reason why I'm here is to talk about a document that I worked on called the Forum Guide to Elementary and Secondary Virtual Education Data. I'm not going to go into depth about all the areas, but just give you a high-level overview about what's included in the resource and some of the chapters. So this resource was developed in 2016 by both, that mixture of state agency and school district appointees from each state. The purpose was to develop a document which could assist states and districts in two main issues. First, we wanted to consider the impact of virtual education and on the established data elements and the methods for collecting that information. You know, as many of you know, virtual education has changed across time, particularly, you know, when we think about that 30-year span that the forum has been around, and the ubiquitous nature of technology that has happened very quickly. So it's changed how we collect basic information. So, for example, how we track attendance in a virtual course may differ from how we might measure that in a seat time in a traditional course. Virtual education has created opportunities to collect new and different data, such as the increased ability to or collect competency information. Second, the document was developed to assist states and districts to address the rapid changes in virtual education, in keeping up with new technology developments, and again, that proliferation of virtual education resources. Go on to the next slide, thank you. So Chapter 1 examines the role of virtual education. There are many terms that schools and districts and state use to describe virtual education. The mixture between virtual and traditional sort of brick and mortar courses. The Forum Educational Working Group eventually decided and settled on a definition that we have listed here on the slide. This broad definition includes a number of methods for accessing and delivering virtual education. This could include real-time instruction between teachers and students through an electronic medium. It includes coursework that could be presented online for students to either do at their own pace or synchronously, or collaboratively online work that students can access from their classroom. One thing I'll also mention is that we're working on a new version of an updated guide to virtual education. That work is underway by the forum, and I'm excited to assist in what that new and expanded resource includes. So to make informed decisions, education stakeholders need to understand how virtual education opportunities and technologies can impact education policy and education data. However, existing data systems that are capable of providing high-quality data for accountability and decision-making may not be able to accommodate virtual education data, particularly when there could be discrepancies between the type of data that's relevant to virtual education and the data elements that might be collected by a traditional education delivery system. As many of us learned this spring, there are challenges when trying to collect high-quality virtual education data. However, these challenges aren't new. This slide illustrates some of the challenges that we were thinking about and working on as a forum group that we identified in 2016. Things like the use and types of courses, grade level school and school assignments, and then tracking things like progress and pace as kids progress through online coursework. So it's important to acknowledge these challenges, but it's also important to note that students, educators, and policymakers can benefit from new and different types of data that can be gained through these virtual education delivery systems. So the new technologies can help facilitate and implement things like individualized and personalized and differentiated education in rapidly changing ways. Schools and teachers have the increased ability to award course credit based on the student mastery, so they could go through that course on their own time, rather than based on the regular seat time that we traditionally think of. These virtual education systems can also provide more precise information on student knowledge and skills, which would assist educators in better understanding student learning and perhaps where problems exist or need areas for a particular student. It can provide immediate feedback on student assessments and help teachers modify their instruction to meet students where they are in their learning progression. So Chapter 2 of the resource identifies commonly used virtual education data elements in 3 broad categories. The first category identifies K-12 virtual and blended data elements in a traditional data system. The use of the virtual education indicator, for example, identifies data elements that might otherwise be undistinguishable from a traditional data element. The second category includes elements that identify organizations that are responsible for different aspects of education, such as transporting school students, providing funding, or who might be responsible for tracking things like attendance. The third broad category includes data elements that are applicable to both traditional as well as virtual education, such as credit and achievement. While some virtual education opportunities can conform to a traditional time and credit structure, others do not. The data elements identified in the document are not meant to provide a full or comprehensive list of all virtual education data elements. They were really intended to be a starting point for agencies to develop and expand their current data system. And so the list should be and could be modified and adapted to meet the needs of your agency. And Chapter 3 is, I think, a really comprehensive component of the resource. It introduces a list of different topic areas. It provides examples, policy questions, and common practices that can help support both SEAs and LEAs as they develop out the data elements and the systems for delivering virtual education. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about these different topic areas. So here are a few examples of the content areas that are covered. So in integrating virtual education data into existing data systems, we really need to identify the policy questions that we have. SEAs and LEAs must know what the questions that their data systems must be able to answer. They also need to know whether the existing policies are sufficient to collect quality virtual education data. The working group identified 24 different topic areas for SEAs and LEAs to consider when integrating virtual education data into their existing data systems or when you're building a new system. There are example scenarios, policy questions, and again, those common practices for each of the topic areas that we included in the guide. So I'm going to talk, just provide a few examples of some of these topic areas. So let's take a closer look at this first one, which is course information. Consider the example in the scenario. There's a guidance counselor who might assume that a student who took a virtual education course would be prepared for the next sequential course. However, since the virtual education curriculum that they ended up taking within that course was not aligned to state standards, some of the relevant content that should have been covered wasn't. So there are cases where courses with an identical name may not actually teach that identical content. And without sort of a standard course classification system, there's no way to necessarily know how similar or how different such courses might be. Some of the policy questions that schools and districts must consider to avoid such a situation, such as these that are here. So can you map a transferred course, including credits, to your organization's course classification? It's just one example of that policy question. So the next topic area is really course section information. And in this particular example, a student may rapidly advance through a self-paced course and take an end-of-course assessment, resulting in that student being awarded more credit than they might have traditionally received in a traditional education delivery system. And in this case, the administration and the school want to encourage the student by taking those particular kinds of online options. But they also realize that there could be an unintended consequence, and they must consider things like that rapid academic progress. And so they have to establish policies in order to determine what to do. So when developing these policies, and to avoid situations like this one, schools and districts should consider questions related to course pacing and timing, questions related to attendance, and progression through that course. Another area of common practices and considerations can help address some of these policy questions. There are certain instructional approaches which may result in students completing a virtual course in more or less time than it's typically allotted. An asynchronous class may require us to count attendance differently than just the traditional seat time measure. So things like a completion of a partial course, completion of the end of course assessment, things like that could be considered. Could also consider student competency, which is often used to determine according to a specific learning standard. So it can be helpful and useful to maintain copies of what those standard statements are and how it might map onto a specific course section. The next topic area that I'll talk about is student attendance information. As I talked a little bit earlier, student attendance can be challenging, particularly to measure in student courses. We just, in Iowa as an example, had a webinar on Friday talking with districts about the different ways to consider taking attendance in a virtual or hybrid learning situation. So, for example, technologies can create challenges that can hinder student access. So if a student might not have reliable access to the internet, they may not have a working device or a device at all. Certainly this can negatively impact student attendance. So in that particular case, are there other activities that that student could participate in while they're not online that could also be considered as well? So SEAs and LEAs can consider how attendance is determined and how it's developed, and modify your local attendance policy to include virtual education attendance. So continuing on, attendance in a virtual setting may most accurately be measured by factors such as the number of times that a student logs in or completes that end of unit performance, amongst others. You could also consider a combination of attendance factors, such as the time that a student spent in that online system. The frequency of student contact with teachers could also be considered. Things like, posing questions to the teacher or participating in an online sort of threaded discussion asynchronously could also be another example that shows that that student really is engaged in that course and is learning So sort of the participation piece that you might typically have within a class. Certainly there's a way to do that in a virtual education setting. Attendance should also incorporate things that are done at home. If a virtual class is given, after sort of typical school hours would end, such as in the evening. We also have a number of appendices that are included within the document. For example, Appendix C goes into the data elements that are relevant to each of the 24 topic areas that are included. So that's in Appendix C, which refers to the topic areas that are in Chapter 3. The appendices also includes examples of SEA and LEA policies. There's also a list of virtual and distance learning websites for many states. And there's a list of references and related resources in the guide. So all forum resources, including the virtual education resource, are free of charge and can be accessed through the forum website. The forum also has a listserv, an email listserv that we use to share information with non-members. So you can contact Gautam Behru. Gautam's email address is at the bottom of this email. Gautam is a wonderful person to work with at NCES and oversees the forum. So reach out to her if you're interested in receiving regular emails about new resources as they become available. The information and opinions that are published in the forum products do not necessarily represent the policies or views of the U.S. Department of Education, the Institute of Education Sciences, or the National Center for Education Statistics. They were created, again, in collaboration with both SEA and LEA partners. So appreciate your time and opportunity to present the forum guide. I'm going to turn it back over to, I believe, Christina, who's going to introduce the next part of the webinar. So thank you.
Thank you, Jay. And so we will move directly into the introductions for the two individuals. So Pressler, I believe you were going to share first.
Yes, thank you, Christina. Greetings, everyone. My name is Pressler Martin, and I'm from Pohnpei, Federated States of Micronesia. I'm currently the Chief of Curriculum and Instruction and Specialized Program. Let me give you an overview of our demographics. We have 31 public primary schools and 3 public high schools, and we have 6 private schools. Of the 31 public primary schools, we have 7 outer island schools. And these are the schools that we can only reach them by boat or by the small planes. We have 9,514 students and 479 regular classroom teachers and 55 classroom resource teachers that serve the special needs students. When COVID strikes and causes government shutdown, there are a number of discussions around ways to continue service to our students that would support the government mandates on precautionary measures. So before we start, we came up with a survey, and the survey is on to find out the household accessibility to internet and also the numbers of computers available at each household. So when the survey came back, we realized that less than 1/3 of the household have internet accessibility and also computer, laptops. So with that, we already know that we cannot do online platform for the students. So what we came up, we shifted, and then we decided to go with the homeschool, the packets. So we prepare packets, and we also change our scheduling of our students. So what we did for primary schools, from kindergarten all the way to 8th grade, we continue to have face-to-face and also home packets that we prepare for them. And the number of days and hours that they come to the schools is less than the regular face-to-face or the traditional classroom setting. So for kindergarten to 4th grade, they come in at 8 to 12:15 from Monday through Thursday. And 5th to 8th grade, they come in the afternoon from 12:15 to 4:15 from Monday to Thursday. And on Fridays, everybody's off. All the students, they stay at home, and then they do their class work. And we treat Fridays as a prep day for our teachers, where they will prepare lessons and also classwork assignment for the next week. For the high school, it's a little bit different than how we treat elementary or primary school. For high school, we have each grade come in once a week. So for freshmen, they come in on Mondays, full day. Sophomore, they come in on Tuesday. Junior, they come in on Wednesday, and seniors on Thursday. And on Friday, they're taking the day off as well. And that day is also treated as a prep day for the teachers. And when we considered the shift, there are a lot of challenges that we face. First off, we don't have policy in place for virtual learning. And then we also have to make sure that we provide the service to the teachers, to the community, and to the student that best suit their interests. The challenges that we have pretty much on the collection of data. It's really hard when we collect data, let's say for student attendance, because we don't conduct the actual normal classroom that we used to have. The challenge also imposed on the parents because they're not comfortable with the number of hours and then the services that they're getting. In addition to that, there is no online platform that we have that students and teachers can interact, and students are not getting all the supports that they have, the immediate feedback that they need. So the challenge is pretty much on the preparation wise, imposed on the teachers with the loads and loads of classwork that they have to prepare, and the numbers of lesson plans that they have to prepare way in advance. So it's really a challenge for us, but I am very grateful that I get to see, the virtual education policy or guide that Iowa has, so that those are something that we could also consider when we're going to work together to develop the policy and also the best way to service our students. One of the things that I would like to also mention and share here is that this is more like a pilot, where we will pilot, and then when we find out other solutions that will best fit the need, then we'll be able to adjust along the way. So this is what I have to share. When it comes to Pohnpei, that's how we treat, that's how we shifted from the face-to-face classroom and then modify it to fit the need and also to meet the state mandates on precautionary measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Pressler. Shaun?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Pressler, for that background on Pohnpei State. My name is Shaun Suliol. I work for the College of Micronesia in the FSM. Unlike Pressler, who works at the state level, we're a two-year college that works on the national level, and we serve communities based on 4 different islands with 6 campuses. One is a maritime institution. We cannot bring maritime practices online because they can't sail in the internet, so we'll leave that alone. Otherwise, we have been preparing to go online 2 or 3 years out before COVID struck. Even before that, I want to say that we remain COVID-free as of today. 0 cases, we're not letting anybody in. But despite that, we're treating everything as if we are going to have cases, because we are going to. So we went through lockdowns. We're doing social distancing. At any of our college campuses, you have to wear a mask. You're not coming on campus if you don't have a mask. And that's just the physical side. So in the years leading up to COVID-19, we were acquiring online tools to support offline practices. We were always collecting data. We have a homegrown student information system. We bought into an LMS. Some of you might be familiar with Schoology. It's really for K to 12, but it works pretty good for our case because it could accommodate low bandwidth, and the learning curve it's made for elementary school students, so college students would get it rather easily. Just like Pressler, we face the same challenges where we can guarantee internet and computer and technology tools on our campuses, but if everybody's forced to stay home, that's where our challenges begin. So we're looking at different ways to work with our local telecoms or even the stores to see what discounts or help we can bring to our students for tools. Our bookstore has increased its tablets, laptops, and we try to defer the cost of it. But really what our main challenge is changing the mentality of our faculty and our students. A lot of people thought that going online was straightforward, but it's not. A lot of our faculty initially thought that online learning was jumping on Zoom for 45 minutes every day. That's not how it works. We deal with one different time zone, so it's not too bad, but 8 o'clock here is 7 o'clock in some of the other 2 states. So those kind of changes in mentality, it has to change. And this is the second semester. So some of our faculty are learning along the way, as our students are as well. In terms of data, like I said, we've been collecting a lot of data over the years, but really how we interpret it and use them now in this day and age is a little bit different. We've been measuring students a lot, but now we're also looking at ways we can measure faculty and their engagement. Jay brought up a lot of key points, like how do we measure attendance? Is it engagement, or how long they stay on, log in, or how many times they log in? Those are the questions that we've been asking. With again, the mentalities, we still follow the offline mentality. In my office, the IT office, we're actually grateful for this this whole lockdown and the COVID, because people are throwing money our way. Technology has become very important. They don't question purchases anymore. We don't have to beg for money. They just throw it at us. We've been able to increase internet speeds at all our campuses. Where it's difficult or we need redundancy, we've been able to buy satellite dishes and install it to increase capacity. But that still does not answer the question. If they don't come to campus, how are we going to reach them? So what we're finding now is that new solutions inherit new problems and issues. Some we can foresee, some we cannot. So we're just watching things carefully. My personal experience, 24 hours a day, I'm getting emails, I'm getting Facebook messages across all social media platforms. I can't do this, I need to do that. So even my IT team, we're changing the way we do things to accommodate these changes. It's not so much face-to-face, but just answering questions. And we come from 4 different islands with 4 different cultural backgrounds, but for the average Micronesian student, they're very shy and not forthcoming with problems. They're not going to come up to you and say, I have this problem, I need it fixed. That's what we experienced before COVID-19. We still face that today online. A lot of our students don't want to be embarrassed, or they don't know how to ask for help. But I'm also finding that through email or help desk ticketing, more students are able to ask because they're not face-to-face with you. And we're also tracking a lot of that help desk ticketing, so we can maybe find out where our weaknesses are or our strengths, or just what kind of help desk tickets are coming in, so we can better tackle the issues. In this month is the end of our fiscal year, and we're discussing budget for FY22. So these data is very important. I also just mentioned that we are accredited by WASC, so we have to follow all the same rules that most of you do, guidelines from the US Department of Education, as we receive funding from them. So data, privacy, everything we have to follow just like anybody else, even though we're on small islands, warm weather, sunny today. But that's just an overview of what we're doing. And it's exciting times. We're trying to look at it as an opportunity to upgrade ourselves. And it's really forced our hands. And for me, it's very exciting, as we can do a lot more. We're actually working on substantive change to see if things do go back to normal, we can continue delivering courses online. And like I said, these are new solutions, so we're finding out new problems. Like, we didn't realize that we had to ask permission from the state of Hawaii or Guam to deliver courses to our students who are stranded there. But we did, and we're able to deliver. There's a lot of talk, because over the years, our enrollment has been declining. This might be an opportunity to address that issue. So we're very excited to see if we could go down those avenues. And like Pressler says, we have school districts in the schools in remote islands. If we can bring internet there, students don't have to travel anymore. We can come to them. And that is something that I really look forward to. And that's just an overview of where I'm coming from. Thank you.
So I think we're at our question and answer session, so we can open it up for questions for Jay and Pressler and Shaun. You're welcome to put questions into the chat box. I think our group is small enough that you could also unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question using your microphone. In the meantime, while you think of what you might like to ask, I am copying a link to our survey for this session, and we'd like to ask you to complete that. It's very, very short. It doesn't take too much time. We'd just like to know what you liked about this session, what you might like to see us do going forward. So we'd very much appreciate it if you could take some time to click that link and complete that survey. We'll keep monitoring the chat box here for a minute, but please also feel free to unmute yourself to ask any questions you might have.
Hi, I have a question. So my name is Sabrina Suwaimahuka. I am an educator here in American Samoa. And based on what Pressler and Shaun had shared, we're kind of facing the same struggle. Although we don't have any positive cases of the virus here, we're still taking precautionary measures as well. And we have blended learning. And so just kind of based on your responses and due to the remoteness of the islands, I was wondering if you had any preferred virtual platforms or web applications that you have found more useful in order to kind of continue that engagement with your students and also with the staff as well.
Well, as far as the college is concerned, I think the bottom line for everything is communications. As long as we keep those channels open, things can happen from phones to, we still meet people face to face here and there. But in terms of software, like I said, we use Schoology, but email is still very king. So we have emails. And then what we're also doing is we're looking at adding apps to Schoology to further, for assessment purposes, measuring. There is a application we recently bought into called Dropout Detective. Per individual course, you can see who's doing well, who's at risk, medium risk, or doing well. But at a bird's eye view, I'm a system administrator, and my counselors and the instructional administrators, they can see individual student records and how they're doing overall, how many assignments they're missing, so we can intervene. So it's more of a retention application, but it's proving very helpful. So our counselors are reaching out to these students of what's going on. And most of the time we're finding out they're having access issues. So as a result of that, what we've done is, we converted our classrooms into mini labs. We have to practice social distancing, so each lab can have 10 computers. And since the classrooms are not in use, we're just creating more labs. That's just a quick example. Thank you.
Thank you. So in case of Pohnpei, we don't have, we still do face-to-face. So students still come to class like once, or for elementary school student, they come in like 4 times a week. They're still getting all the supports that they need, except that, when they're not at school and they have some loads of classwork to complete and they have questions, they don't have that immediate feedback from the teachers to support them at their school. There is like what Shaun mentioned, they can also use telephone. They can use to phone the teachers up, or if they have internet, they can do Facebook call to the teachers. But that's just the line of communication as of now, and also the support from the parents, if they need support from the parents.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So we do have a question in the chat from Dr. Lutz. She's asking, how do schools using virtual education either fully or partially comply with performance expectations and requirements associated with state report cards that are based on face-to-face or on-site education? Schools have had to shift unexpectedly from traditional education to online education. So she's curious about that aspect.
So I can start and others can jump in too. It's a great question, and one that we're working through the details. Every state is required to do a report card. All states, I believe, received waivers for the large-scale accountability system measures that would have happened typically in the 2019-20 school year, but due to closure in spring of 20, most states didn't have the opportunity to do those assessments. So, many states are asking for sort of a 1-year pause in accountability determinations. I think what we're going to land on as a state it's not yet to be determined, but showing the data that we have, right, that is available. So certainly we don't have the assessment data, but we do have attendance data, at least up to the point where schools close. So, heavily, communicate within the website what that data represents, what's missing, what it doesn't represent, and update those websites and report cards based on the information that we have. But I know our plan is not to do an accountability score for schools based on the 1920 school year, because it's so heavily weighted on assessment information. So, so we're hoping to do a pause there because of COVID.
I believe Pohnpei, they also have, they waive as well, because we do have a mandatory instructional days of at least 180, and we do have mandatory instructional hours of 4.5 hours a day. So that's the mandatory instructional days and mandatory instructional hours. But in the meantime, I know that we didn't to the national minimum competency test that were supposed to be taken every year because of the COVID. And I think similar to Jay, I think we got a wave too.
For the college, yeah, we got waived because we were never permitted in the beginning to do online courses. We still had to make contact hours. So that's where we are. We're waived, but what we're doing now is acceptable. One of our challenges it just came to mind was a lot of our courses are, especially at our career and technical education center, are practicum. And so they have to do contact hours. For now, what they're doing is smaller classes and in more sections, so 10 students. But should we go into a full lockdown, we're buying all these equipment for these instructors to at least be able to demonstrate online how to do things. And you know, since the courses are smaller, if it's a carpentry course, maybe we can provide the lumber or the nails, or you know, a lot of our instructors are finding creative ways to deliver, so we can actually measure those online contact hours, for example.
Thank you, Jay and Shaun and Pressler. Shaun, we have a comment for you in the chat box. Thank you for the information on using help desk tickets. Crystal says that she has some American Indian students who have a similar shy personality, and knowing that help desk tickets for tech issues work well for you is a great idea to bring back to their American Indian Achievement Task Force. So that's nice to hear.
If I may add to that too, I'm finding out too that it's very useful and successful for the students. We're also extending it to our faculty and staff. A lot of people at the college, the administrators they realize how useful it is, that it's starting to look like they want to put everything on there. So don't make a simple thing complicated, because I'm trying to pacify them now. Like, when we have so many choices, that's practically no choices at all. So let's try to limit it to the really important things. Let's not make it harder for the students. We want them to come and click 3 or less buttons and get answers right away. So to give them more steps, like ordering a transcript, they wanted them to come to the help desk, order a transcript, log into something else, fill out a form. I'm saying, don't do that. It's just going to make it more complicated. So the help desk is very useful if you go about it strategic and not make it another layer of waiting or complication. Thank you.
Great. Other questions?
Yeah, hi, my name is Crystal Simanu, and I'm an educator here in American Samoa. And I'm just, first off, I want to say I'm really impressed by all of the insightful information that was shared here today. And I'm just wondering how the Ministry of Education in Pohnpei has prioritized data collection, if at all. I feel like that could really help us here in American Samoa.
Thank you for the question. So the way that we collect data, let's say on student attendance, they're still filling out the school information system database that they have at the school. And then what I said earlier is that it's really a challenge when we collect data, especially on Fridays when students are off, and for iSchools, when each class comes in once a week. So I think what they're doing right now, just to let you know that I'm not in Pohnpei. So if I'm in Pohnpei, I will have more information. I'm stranded here in North Carolina and I'm waiting to go back. But what I heard from them is that, you know, it's really based on the classwork that they're doing, you know, the number of completion of the work, that they also base it on that as well.
Okay, so like I said earlier, Pressler works specifically for the Pohnpei State. I work at the national level, and we collect a lot of data for our own use, and other organizations sometimes come to us for that data. But I will say that the National Department of Education because we have 5 departments of education, the national one and the ones at the 4 different states, which actually does the implementation. But the National Department of Education over the last few years have been trying to create a student information system, and they have been collecting data, and they're trying to do a better job. So I just know that they do collect data. How they use it or not at the national level, I am not sure. But I can say that we at the college, we have a institutional research office that does all of that and responds to data requests. And we also do the surveys where, I don't know if they're required or not, but like the SESI survey. So we track student engagement with faculty and stuff like that. Right this week, we're trying to complete the SENS survey. We also do iPad. So we have all that data in order to comply to that reporting.
Thank you so much.
Other questions? I'm scrolling through the participant list to see if anyone looks like they're about to jump in. And again, you can ask any questions you'd like in the chat, and you're welcome to contact us directly after we close out the webinar, and we're happy to follow up with our presenters to get any additional information that we can for you. Going to give it just a couple more beats here to make sure I'm not cutting anyone off before we go ahead and close out.
I was just going to thank you very much for doing this. And this is Sharon Walsh. I work with one of the Department of Ed's funded TA centers called the DAISY Center. It's the Center for IDEA, Early Childhood Data Systems. And I'm just fascinated in listening because we work with states and jurisdictions who have programs for young children with disabilities and their families. So all of this virtual switch to virtual, and then the resulting data disruptions and challenges all have parallels to all the things you've talked about tonight, including recording data on assessment, et cetera, and what your data elements are. So I'm fascinated by the whole thing and listened carefully, but I don't know that I have anything to share or ask about that would relate to the group as a whole, but it was fascinating to listen to the difference between the services you're talking about and the variables and complexity you're dealing with school age to parallel with our work with young children and their families. So thank you.
Thank you. Do any of our presenters want to respond to Sharon's comment? Anything to add?
Yeah, maybe a quick statement. I'm finding that during this COVID, this lockdown and this whole pandemic, the environment worldwide is making everybody, how do I say it? We're at the same level now because a lot of our students are online, your students are going online. I see so much parallel across the different platforms or environments that we're pretty much in the same boat now. I mean, they say the internet has no boundaries, and that's even more so now. And we can learn a lot from each other.
Yeah, I totally agree, Shaun, and I echo completely what you're saying. And I will just share briefly, I know we want to end, one of the silver linings that we have uncovered in national discussions similar to this related to these programs are that usually these services are delivered in a family's home where practitioners come into the home, or in the case of the preschoolers or the pre-K programs, sometimes they're, and more often they're in little class-based programs. But what's happened during the pandemic is those services now are virtual. Well, you can't provide a virtual service to a 6-month-old or even a 2.5-year-old without the caregiver being there during the service. And all of our evidence-based practice work that we've been struggling and pushing for the last 10, 15 years about engaging caregivers, because that's how children learn, we're discovering from the families and the practitioners that that's how you have to do it. So if I'm working with you and your family, or you're working with my family, Shaun, there's no other way for do it except for you to say to me, so Mom, how about if you hold the baby over your shoulder and let's see what happens. Instead of you being in my living room and taking the baby and showing me, it's so much more effective. So despite all the tragedy and the horrible challenges we're facing, there have been some silver linings, particularly in the early childhood world, I would say.
And just to, perhaps a forward-thinking comment as well. And we've had discussions nationally for a long time, like how do you advance the delivery system of education as a whole, right? And certainly there are challenges that are, essential, right? Getting devices to kids so that they can participate in these learning opportunities. At the same time, it's really pushed us as a nation to try to address those issues of equity, bandwidth, devices. And so, while this is definitely a difficult time, maybe the lessons learned can really sort of help accelerate some of those things that might have been more compounded if it didn't happen, right? So if you, forward thinking, more kids will learn at an earlier age how to use a device, how to participate in Zoom, how to, do things that they're going to need to learn to do after they're out of school. So it's a really exciting time as well in that regard.
I think what Shaun mentioned earlier about the shift of the, parents' mindsets, children's mindset, and teachers' mindset. Everything is new, and I know it's going to take a while because, they're stepping out of their comfort zone where they know that they have to be in the classroom to learn. And they have that immediate feedback, that support that they receive from the teacher immediately. And now, the support that they're getting is much lesser these days, but they have to be, the expectation for them is still the same. So that's the balance that we have to, ensure that we provide it to them. And then I know that's what I said. I know it's going to take some time for them to change their mindset and, get used to, the kind of support that we're providing at the moment.
Other thoughts on that? Does anyone else want to jump in and share? Any more questions? And I think we're at a point where we can just thank all of our participants and our presenters today. So thank you, Jay, Pressler, and Shaun, and thank you everyone who's joined us. Thank you also to our ASL interpreters for joining us today. I think we'll go ahead and close this out and give you back a few minutes in your busy schedules. Again, if you could click on that link to take our survey, it should only take a minute or so. It's just a few questions. And then we will send out the recording once we've got that closed captioned and ready to post on our website. So we'll be back in touch about that. And please do send any additional questions, any requests for additional resources to us, and we will do what we can to get you the information you need. So thank you, everyone.